ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This night we enter once again the season of sorrow, the season of mourning of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, their season of sadness for the tragedy of our Imam Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, the master of the martyrs and one of the masters of paradise, as well as his companions and family members in the massacre that took place in Karbala 14 centuries ago. This is a season of mourning that for some of us will last perhaps 10 days. For some of us it may last up to 40 days, up to the Arba'een. And for some of us it may last a little bit longer, including the entirety of the months of Muharram and Safar, depending on our level of commitment to Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam and understanding of their tragedy. As we enter these blessed and holy days and nights, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our deeds, to open our minds and our hearts as we enter what we can truly consider to be a time of divine mercy and blessings in the remembrance of our master Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. For truly those who understand what it means to remember Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to be in his presence, to be in the remembrance of his companions, the values for which he stands, will understand that this is truly a heaven on earth and a truly divine blessing and mercy, the time that we spend remembering our Imam Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. Every year in the season of Ashura, there are many questions around what to cover in the lectures, what should speakers and thinkers cover and address as part of the lectures. And these are important questions. Should we stick to the classical traditional approach of talking about Karbala and the tragedy and the history and the sequence of the events, or should we address more contemporary issues and open up our thinking and our approach to the event of Karbala? And then many questions always surround the actual benefits that we are receiving from the time that we are spending attending these gatherings, attending these majalis at the individual level as communities. Are we truly benefiting in an optimal manner from these gatherings? There is a lot of time and a lot of energy spent every year as we prepare for these gatherings, as we attend these gatherings. There is nothing wrong for us as communities to have foresight and to have vision, and even for some constructive feedback to be used in order to improve in these types of gatherings, and to make sure that whatever gatherings are taking place, whatever topics and issues and subjects are addressed in these lectures, that they are achieving the maximum benefit from these types of gatherings, and that we are all benefiting individually and as communities from these blessings. At the same time, the true and honest and objective attitude that we should adopt when we approach and we think about these types of gatherings should not start from an attitude of what these gatherings are offering to me, or what these types of institutions, these mosques, these Husayniyat, the lecturers and the thinkers and the speakers are offering to me, as much as it should be about what is my attitude and what is my intention when I attend these types of lectures and when I attend these types of gatherings. There is a way for me to attend in which I am simply a passive receiver. I simply sit back as though I am a guest of honor somewhere, and I receive information, and I am being almost entertained by different types of programs that are being offered to me, and I wait to see whether it is up to my standards, and I may or may not criticize and offer some critique of what I am hearing and what I am seeing and what I am experiencing, and then the events and the programming ends after 10 days or 13 days or a few weeks, and then we wait until the next Muharram, and this cycle happens again and again and repeats itself. That's one way to attend these types of gatherings. Another, perhaps a lot more beneficial way of attending these gatherings is to attend them with a sincere intent, that I am attending with an open mind and an open heart. I am attending to fully benefit, to see what I can take from the school of Karbala, from the school of Imam Al-Hasany alayhi salam. A lot of this is a question of attitude and a question of intent. When I attend, I can decide that I am going to be an active participant in my own transformation, in my own improvement, or I can decide that I'm going to be passive and simply receive things as they are shared with me, and I may decide whether they affect me or not. These are two very different types, two very different ways of approaching and addressing the lectures and the programs of the holy month of Muharram and the season of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And I think that, inshallah, for the majority of us, this is simply going to be a reminder that as we enter into this season once again, that we make a pure, sincere, and intentional intention that we are going to be deliberate, that we want to be active participants in our own guidance, in the transformation that Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam can cause in our hearts, in our souls, and in our lives. Which means that we have to prepare ourselves accordingly. When we attend these types of gatherings, as we said, it can be passive, or if I decide to be an active participant, it means that I prepare myself and I ready myself psychologically. I ready myself physically. I perform a wudu. I know that I am attending a place of worship in the presence and in the remembrance of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. My presence here is an act of worship. It comes with an intent. It comes with the idea that I am attending the remembrance of the master of the youth of paradise, the master of the martyrs of Islam, Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, and his companions. And this can have truly transformational aspects on my life. And therefore, I give myself the chance to receive the blessings and the guidance that can come from these types of gatherings and these types of programs. The next point that I want to talk about before addressing tonight's topic, inshallah, has to do with the need for us to constantly think about the heart and the mind, both of them together, when we think about Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. There is no doubt that there are many different ways to approach the tragedy of Karbala. One way to approach the tragedy of Karbala is to look at it as a purely historical event and address it as a purely historical event, where we study the events, the sequence of events that took place one after the other before the tragedy itself, those causes and effects that led all the way to the tragedy, then the events of the tragedy itself, then the events that took place after the tragedy. We look at the events, we look at the important personalities, we look at the geographical locations, the milestones, the big decisions, and we look at them from a historical point of view, the sequence of events. That's one way to approach the tragedy of Karbala. And to be honest, we have absolutely no interest in doing that. If we talk about history, when we talk about the tragedy of Karbala, It is not to talk about history. We're not interested in the history for the sake of history. We are interested in the history for other reasons. And there are many reasons to be interested in history. And this is inshallah what we keep in mind, so that if in the next coming nights, when we talk about historical aspects related to the tragedy of Karbala, that these are the points that come back to mind. And we don't think that we're talking about history because we want to be history buffs and we crave historical details and name dropping and going into the sequence of events in an elaborate way. This is not what we're looking for. If we go back to the Holy Quran, we see that the Holy Quran gives us a lot of history, a lot of stories. The Holy Quran spends a lot of time talking about previous peoples, people who existed on this planet. It talks about prophets. It talks about other personalities, some of them good, some of them not so good. Is it because the Holy Quran is a book of history? Is it because the Holy Quran is a book of stories? No. The Holy Quran is using all of this, and the Holy Quran says, these are not fictional tales that we're telling you. These are not simple stories. This is all al-qasas al-haqq, the Quran says. These are all truthful. So it falls under the category of history. But the Holy Quran does not give us historical details for the sake of historical details. The Holy Quran gives us these details so that we may understand the peoples that came before us. We want to understand, why is it that those who were successful became successful? And why is it that those who became unsuccessful ended up being unsuccessful? What factors led to this? We want to understand things that teach us things about this world, things that allow us to better understand this life of ours, how society works, how human nature is, so that we perhaps do not fall into the same mistakes as those who came before us, so that we may learn from their lessons. And we take all of this back into our lives. And so what we're looking for and what the Holy Quran is trying to teach us are values and teachings that are practical, that are applicable into our lives. They're not limited to historical details told to us for the sake of historical details. A second reason why we look at history is that, generally speaking, and this is human instinct, when a human being loves someone, and this applies even to things, when a human being loves a thing, an object, an event, when a human being loves, they want to know a lot more about the object of their love. The more you love, the more you want to know about that which you love. Whether it's an object, whether it's a person, whether it's an event. And look at your own lives. Whatever you find yourself loving, you will see that you find yourself going to dig for information about that object of love. And this applies to human beings as well. When you love a human being, you want to know more about them. And usually the more you know, the more you will end up loving. And this creates a relationship, except that in a lot of cases we are all imperfect. And sometimes you find out too much. And then perhaps that love starts to weaken. This is normal. Unless that love is towards something that we consider to be perfect. And this is what we find in the case, for instance, of our love, let's say, for prophets. Our love for Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. If we claim and we feel that we love Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, the natural inclination should be that we go digging and looking for information about them. The more I love Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, the more I should want to know about them. I want to know how he looks. I want to know how he sits and how he eats and how he thinks and what he taught and how he lived. Every member of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam should trigger that type of feeling in me. And this is normal. This is human instinct. And there's a way to direct that human instinct in a way that leads to improving my life. That's a second reason why we study history. Because this history, including the tragedy of Karbala and the history around it, allows us to know a lot more about Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And this is a sign of our love towards Imam Al-Hussein and the companions of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. Why did he go to Karbala? Why did he embark in this type of journey? What was he trying to achieve? Who were his companions? The more I know, the more I should want to know about these types of events. A third, perhaps, reason, and this one is another important one for our lives with practical implications, is that we consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we strongly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us role models, people that we should emulate and follow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these role models to be followed in a practical, applicable way in our lives. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells me the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is your role model, Imam Ali alayhi salam is your role model, Fatima al-Zahra is your role model, this means that I should know enough about them to be able to follow in their footsteps. How can I follow in someone's footsteps? How can I consider someone to be my role model if I don't know anything about their life? And this is one of the main reasons why we spend time trying to understand the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And in today's world, our lives are getting more and more complex. It's no longer sufficient for me to say that I will take Ahlul Bayt as my role models without looking in detail into their lives. What type of society were they in? What type of challenges did they face? What type of complexities and changes happened in their lives that required them to navigate and to think and to maneuver in that complex environment? What were their teachings to their followers in their time? Did they have teachings for their followers who were not part of their own generations? That would come later. If I consider Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam to be my role models, I have to be able to talk about these things, to think about these things, to study them and analyze them and see how I can apply them in my life. And all of that to say, we started by saying there are many ways to look at the events of Karbala. Everything that we just described falls under the general way of looking at Karbala through the mind. This is all intellectual work. I have to sit and I have to think. This is the work and the way of the mind. And this is usually the work that is led by scholars and thinkers. So scholars and thinkers will document the event, and they will study it, and they will analyze it, and then they will present it, and it will become accessible to others. And there is nothing wrong with that. In fact, it is necessary. But there are other ways to approach Karbala. There are other ways to approach Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam and his tragedy. And the main other way is the way of the heart. The way to approach Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam is not only through the mind. The mind is great. The mind is important. The mind is necessary. But it's not the only way. And the other way is the heart. And interestingly enough, it is the way of the heart that Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam emphasized when it comes to the tragedy of Karbala, not the way of the mind. Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam wanted to create a connection between human beings and Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam that begins from the heart, not the mind. And the main reason for this is that the way of the heart is universal. When you understand Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam through your heart, it is intuitive. Every human being, if you are a human being who understands what happened, you will consider this to be a horrific tragedy. And that's all you need to enter into the world of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. The other way requires you to become a scholar, to become an intellectual, to use your mind. And the further you can analyze, the greater your understanding will be. The way of the heart does not require any of that. If you are a human being with emotions and feelings and normal instinctive human values, you are going to understand the tragedy of Karbala, the tragedy of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. Regardless of your age, you may be 3 years old, you will understand at your level the tragedy of Karbala. Regardless of your age, regardless of your level of education, regardless of your social background, regardless of your religion, regardless of your belief system. If you are a human being, you will understand the tragedy of Karbala. And this understanding is an understanding of the heart. And Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam emphasized in the case of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam the way of the heart more than the way of the mind. And as we said, the way of the mind is necessary. But Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam wanted to make sure that the gate through which we access Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is first and foremost the gate of the heart, because it is universal and it speaks to everyone and no one is going to be excluded from it. Once people enter into this gate through the heart, this is when they start to ask themselves questions. This is when they start to examine their lives. This is when they look at their identity and start identifying with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Why did Imam al-Hussein do this? What values did he stand for? Which part of this do I align with? Do I identify with? Do I agree with? Perhaps I should change my life so that these values and these teachings are represented in my life and I live by them. This is the entry point to embark on what Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam have called the boat or the ship of salvation and rescue, that is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You enter it through the heart. You don't necessarily have to enter it through an intellectual effort, an effort of the mind. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam himself told us that the main reason why he led the revolution and the movement that he led in society is that he wanted to reform the world. He wanted to change the world, to correct and to fix the wrongs, and to transform it so that it improves. In one word, we call this reform, al-islah. This is the word that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam used. I have only gone out with the objective of performing reform. I want to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and my father, the Messenger of God and Imam Ali alayhi salam. I want to enjoin good and forbid evil. These are the words of Imam al-Hussein. But in one word, he summarized all of this with islah. If we want to become true followers of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, we have to align. We have to at least not contradict this reform. Otherwise, in our practical lives, if we are doing things which Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was trying to fix and we continue not to reform ourselves, we are going against the efforts of Imam al-Hussein. But Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam could say, I want to change the world. I want to reform the world. At my level, I have to take it one step at a time. I cannot reform the world without reforming the society in which I live. And I cannot reform the society in which I live without reforming my own community. And I cannot reform my own community if I do not reform my own family. And I cannot reform my own family if I have not reformed myself from within. And once again, there's a lot that can be said about reforming ourselves from within. But the easiest and the shortest way to reform ourselves from within is through the heart, not the mind. As necessary as it is to reform ourselves with an intellectual effort, that journey is a lot shorter and a lot easier if it starts from the heart. And this is yet one more reason why we should connect with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam if we want to reform ourselves, if we want to work on self-improvement, self-discipline, motivation, transforming ourselves from within. All of this can start from the heart, from attaching ourselves through our hearts back to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. This becomes a cleansing act, an act of purification. You come with a broken heart to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You understand that there are blessings to be received, that you have shortcomings and you have flaws, and that this time is going to recharge you spiritually and fix you and heal you and cure you, so that you leave this tiny short season, a few days and nights, a reformed human being, recharged spiritually, at least until the next time that you are able to sit in these types of gatherings and to receive this type of spiritual charge again in the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. When we go back to the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, we see that they applied all of these teachings not only with words and with their instructions to their followers, but in the way that they lived their lives. And this is something that we see from the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ all the way to the Imam of our time, Imam al-Hujjah Ajjalallahu Farajahu al-Sharif. The importance that they all give to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The importance they give to the attachment to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through the heart, not through the mind, as important, as we said, as the mind can be. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and this is not random, that they asked people to attach themselves back to Imam al-Hussein through the heart. Through this, Ahlul Bayt know that on the one side, it is going to keep the remembrance of Karbala and the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam alive in society. And in the other side, by keeping alive the remembrance of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, we keep ourselves spiritually alive. We continue to benefit from Karbala by associating with it through the heart, by feeling something towards Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And it's great that we can add, if we can add an intellectual dimension. That's amazing. But at a minimum, the emotional component cannot go away. These are the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. And these are the manners in which Imam Hussein alayhi salam engineered the event of Karbala, so that it would be remembered as an event through which you attach through your heart, not through your mind. If we go through the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam very quickly, we see that there is a special place to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and his tragedy in the manner in which they lived their lives and in the manner in which they gave us the teachings related to it. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam holds a distinctive place in this canvas, this beautiful canvas of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. He's very special, even though Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam should all be special. But Imam Hussein has distinctions that are not shared by any other member of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Not the Holy Prophet, not Imam Ali alayhi salam, not Fatima al-Zahra, not his older brother Imam Al-Hasany alayhi salam, and none of his sons. One of these, for instance, is the insistence that we find in the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam about reciting the ziyarah, the salutation of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam at all times. In general, there are no exceptions to this. We should be performing a salutation, a ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in all circumstances. And we have general ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam in this regard. Ziyarat where the Imam say, you may use this ziyarah to salute Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam at any time, in any situation, whether you are far or close from the shrine, whatever you're going through. And we also have, if you go through the calendar of Islamic events, every event in the Islamic calendar has a specific and dedicated ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. No matter what the event is. Every Eid you look at, there is a ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. You look at the important milestones in Islamic history, days such as Al-Mab'ath, many other days, there's always a ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Why? It has nothing to do with Imam al-Hussein. Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam want to use every pretext and every opportunity to link us back to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through a ziyarah. This is a special distinction of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. We do not have these ziyarat for the rest of Ahlul Bayt. For all of these events, for every situation you could think of, dedicated ziyarat in addition to the general ziyarat. More. The special status of the turba of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. This deserves its own lecture, if not lectures. There are a lot of distinctions and exceptional situations regarding this turba, the soil that comes from the grave where Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was buried. One of the recommendations, or we'll start with the exception. In Islam, it's forbidden to eat soil, to eat sand, to eat mud and clay. It's forbidden. Unless it is from the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. In that case, you're allowed to put a little bit in your mouth with the intention that it cures you from any ailments and any illnesses. There are many ahkam, many verdicts in legal Islamic theory related to this. We need to think about this. How come? Why only Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam? We don't have this about anyone else. Moreover, it's recommended to perform every sujood, especially the sujood of your prayers, on the turba of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, on sand or clay or mud or soil that comes from the grave of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. To remember Imam Al-Hussein in your prayer. It is recommended to have a misbaha, a sibha, a rosary made of beads that come from the grave of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. So that when you praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and glorify him, you remember Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And we don't have these teachings for the rest of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. When the newborn comes to this world, it's recommended to take a little bit from the soil, from the turba of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, and put it in their palate, in the mouth of the newborn. Just enough so that this is one of the first things that they taste when they enter into this world. It is recommended that if you travel, that you always carry the turba of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam with you for protection and to perform your prayers. If you go to visit Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, we all know that when you travel, if you exceed a certain distance beyond the 23, around 22 and a half, 23 kilometers, that you're supposed to shorten your prayers. You perform them in qasr. The 4 raka'at become 2 raka'at. If the total distance is more than 45 to 46 kilometers. If you visit the shrine of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, you have the choice to perform it as qasr or in full. Why? And more. There is a lot of these. I'll end with the recommendation to perform the mourning, the aza on Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. The recommendation to weep and to cry over Imam Al-Hussein. The recommendation to make others cry for Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. The recommendation to recount the tragedy of Karbala, to tell it in ways that are effective for people to learn about it. We don't have specific traditions and teachings from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam for all of them regarding all of this for their own lives. These are all distinctions for Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And all of these are opportunities that Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam are taking to bring us back to connect to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam through the heart. All of these are ways so that we never go out of the remembrance of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, no matter what situation we're in. And this we could show through the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam and through their teachings. And we have done so in the past with many of the Imams, and many of these are well known. In the time that I have, I'll try to go through some of the sayings specifically from one member of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, and that is Imam Ali alayhi salam. The reason I talk about Imam Ali, to see what he had to say and how he connected people back to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, there are many reasons. The first reason is that I don't think we hear enough about what Imam Ali alayhi salam had to say about Karbala. Many of us know many of the traditions that come to us from Imam Sajjad, Imam Al-Baqir, Imam Al-Sadiq, Imam Al-Kadhim, Imam Al-Rida alayhi salam. How many do we know from Imam Ali alayhi salam specifically about Karbala? Secondly, Imam Ali alayhi salam is our most important Imam. He's our first Imam. Thirdly, he is the father of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. And that in itself requires more discussion and more thinking on our part to look at that relationship between a father and a son who are both Imams. In addition to that, Imam Ali alayhi salam is by far the most influential Imam from among Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam in the Islamic world, beyond the lovers and followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam, everyone wants to know what he said and how he conducted himself and what did he do. Whether you love and follow Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam or you don't. You cannot avoid going through Imam Ali alayhi salam as an Islamic personality to understand Islamic teachings. So it becomes very significant and meaningful to see what Imam Ali alayhi salam had to say about the tragedy of Karbala and how he dealt with it, how he conducted himself with regards to the tragedy of Karbala. Beyond all of this, Imam Ali alayhi salam would have said everything that he said about Karbala way before the events of Karbala. Imam Ali alayhi salam lived before and died and was martyred before the tragedy of Karbala. He left this world year 40. Karbala happens year 61 of Hijrah. So that's 21 years at least. And as we shall see in the narrations, the majority of the traditions that come to us, and we will be looking at the reports, they seem to have been said when Imam Ali alayhi salam was the Khalifa, which means that it would have happened towards the end of his life, which tells us that the majority of these reports are around 25 to 20 years before the tragedy of Karbala, which is in itself a form of prophecy. It's miraculous that Imam Ali alayhi salam talks in this type of detail about the tragedy that has not yet taken place. In terms of time, the majority of these seem to have happened when Imam Ali alayhi salam was traveling back and forth. Imam Ali alayhi salam would have traveled 3 times to Karbala, at least documented in history, and perhaps more, during the time of his Khilafah. Twice was to go to the Battle of Siffin and to come back from the Battle of Siffin. That way went through Karbala. And he would stop both ways. And we have many reports around this. And the third time was when Imam Ali alayhi salam went to the Battle of Nahrawan to fight the Khawarij. Imam Ali alayhi salam also stopped at Karbala. And we have a lot of reports around that. And by the way, in all those 3 trips, both Imam Al-Hasany and Imam Al-Husayn alayhim salam were with Imam Ali, and it's documented in history. Which tells us first that Imam Al-Husayn alayhi salam would have heard the prophecies around his own martyrdom and what would happen from Imam Ali alayhi salam in these events. Because there's often a question about whether and to what extent did Imam Hussein alayhi salam know what was awaiting him at Karbala. We know for sure, and there is no doubt, and this is further confirmation, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was very well aware of what was awaiting him in Karbala. All of Ahlul Bayt knew. This is in addition to his divine knowledge. And secondly, it means that when Imam Hussein, when you read in the Maqatil, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam reaches Karbala and he starts asking, what is the name of this land? It means that Imam Hussein alayhi salam is not really asking about the name of this land. He knows what this land is called. He's been here at least 3 times before, if not more. So we have to study and analyze, why is it that Imam Hussein alayhi salam keeps insisting, what is the name of this? And they give him a name, and he says, but doesn't it have another name? And doesn't it have another name? And doesn't it have another name? Why? We need to think about that. But it's certainly not because Imam Hussein alayhi salam did not know what this land is called. We move to the ahadith themselves. Very quickly, I'm looking at the time. These ahadith are going to teach us how Imam Ali alayhi salam is conducting himself, is reacting to the tragedy of Karbala before it happens. Today the tragedy has happened. We are dealing with reality today. It's normal that I react in a certain way. Imam Ali alayhi salam is reacting to something that has not happened yet. And so when you look at these ahadith, try to put yourself in that situation. Try to put yourself with Imam Ali alayhi salam as he's telling these reports. And as we said, try to approach it in the same attitude as Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam are saying. That you come to this not only with an open mind, but with an open heart. Feel something as you see how Imam Ali alayhi salam reacts. Do you see that the Imam is reacting in a way that is of the mind or of the heart? And we are all followers of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and we all, inshaAllah, learn from him. I've chosen short passages Some of them are a little bit repetitive. This is intentional from the Imams. The Imam is repetitive because he wants to make sure that these teachings are well ingrained and well understood. So he repeats the same notions in different ways. But I've also chosen passages that allow us to see that there's something different in each one of them. Something different in every passage. In the first one, in Waq'at Saffin, in Sharh Nahj al-Balagha of al-Mu'tazili, the passage is أن عليا أتى كربلاء فوقف بها فقيل يا أمير المؤمنين هذه كربلاء قال ذات كرب وبلاء ثم أومأ بيده إلى مكان فقال ها هنا موضع رحالهم ومناخ ركابهم وأومأ بيده إلى موضع آخر فقال ها هنا مهراق دمائه. And in another version, دمائهم. Imam Ali alayhi salam, in this report, he comes to stop at Karbala. He was told, O Commander of the Faithful, this is Karbala. And he said, the one with Karb and Bala, the one with sorrow and affliction. He derived those two terms out of the name of the city. And he said, then he pointed with his hand to a spot and he said, that is the place where they will keep their provisions and luggage. And here is where they will stable their mounts, the saddles and the mounts that they put on the camels and the horses. This is where they will dismount them and put them. And then he pointed to his hand to another spot and he said, that is where his blood will be spilt and where it will flow. And in another version, their blood will be spilt and where it will flow. In a second report, مر علي عليه السلام بكربلاء. This is Imam Sadiq عليه السلام in كامل الزيارات and خصائص الأئمة. مر علي عليه السلام بكربلاء فقال لما مر به أصحابه وقد غرورقت عيناه يبكي هذا مناخ ركابهم هذا ملقى رحالهم ها هنا مراق دمائهم طوبى لك من تربة عليها تراق دماء الأحبة. So here Imam Ali alayhi salam passes through Karbala. When his companions come to him, his eyes had filled with tears and he was weeping. And he said, this is where their mounts or their luggage will be stabled. And this is where they will store their provisions. And here is where their blood will be spilt and where it will flow. How blessed are you, O land. Imam Ali alayhi salam talks to the sand, to the land of Karbala. He says, how blessed are you, O land, for the blood of the loved ones shall be spilt on your sands. In Kitab al-Irshad and Kitab Kashf al-Yaqeen, the narrator says, لما توجهنا مع أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام إلى صفين فبلغنا طفوف كربلاء وقف ناحية من المعسكر ثم نظر يمينا وشمالا واستعبر ثم قال هذا والله مناخ ركابهم وموضع منيتهم فقيل له يا أمير المؤمنين ما هذا الموضع فقال هذا كربلاء يقتل فيه قوم يدخلون الجنة بغير حساب ثم سار. So the narrator says, when the commander of the faithful, Imam Ali alayhi salam, headed to Saffin and reached the plains of Karbala, he went to stand aside at a distance from the army. He looked to the right, he looked to the left, and then he wept and he said, by God, this is where their mounts will be stabled. This is where they will be killed. And then he was asked, O master of the believers, what is this place? He responded, this is Karbala. This is where a group of people will be killed who shall enter paradise without account. Then he departed. In the book Usd al-Ghaba, the narrator says, his name is Gharfah, he said, دخلني شك من شأن علي فخرجت معه على شاطئ الفرات فعدل عن الطريق ووقفنا حوله فقال بيده هذا موضع رواحلهم ومناخ ركابهم ومهراق دمائهم بأبي من لا ناصر له في الأرض ولا في السماء إلا الله. فلما قتل الحسين خرجت حتى أتيت المكان الذي قتلوا فيه فإذا هو كما قال ما أخطأ شيئا. قال فاستغفرت الله مما كان مني من الشك وعلمت أن عليا لم يقدم إلا بما عهد إليه فيه. So this narrator says, there are doubts that entered my heart about Imam Ali alayhi salam. And so I accompanied him towards the banks of the Euphrates. On the way, he drew aside and then he stopped, and we stopped around him. He pointed with his hand and said, this is where they will keep their provisions. This is where they will stable their mounts. This is where their blood will be spilt. May my father be a sacrifice for the one who will have no support no one supporting him in the earth nor the heavens except God. Then when Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam was killed, the narrator says, I traveled to the location where he had been killed and found it to be in the precise manner in which he had described. He had not mistaken any detail. So I sought God's forgiveness for the doubts I used to have, for now I realized and knew that Ali alayhi salam never did anything except that it was based on what had been entrusted with him. So the knowledge, the divine mission that he had from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you notice here the Imam said, may my father be a sacrifice. This is a greater sacrifice than sacrificing yourself. Because first you sacrifice yourself to protect your father. When the Arabs say this, this is the height of the sacrifice. There's nothing else left to sacrifice. When the Imam says, may my father be a sacrifice to this one, to Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. These are the words that Imam Ali alayhi salam uses. There's another narration, I'll skip, I'll not have enough time. In تهذيب الأحكام in كامل الزيارات, Imam al-Sadiq عليه السلام says, خرج أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام يسير بالناس حتى إذا كان من كربلاء على مسيرة ميل أو ميلين فتقدم بين أيديهم حتى إذا صار بمصارع الشهداء قال قبض فيها ما أتى نبي وما أتى وصي وما أتى سبط شهداء بأتباعهم فطاف بها على بغلته خارجا رجليه من الركاب وأنشأ يقول مناخ ركاب ومصارع شهداء لا يسبقهم من كان قبلهم ولا يلحقهم من كان بعدهم. In this one, Imam Ali alayhi salam, the commander of the faithful, was marching in the company of a group of people. When they were 1 or 2 miles away from Karbala, he went ahead of the company until he reached the place where the martyrs would fall. Then he said, in this place 200 prophets, 200 successors of prophets, and 200 descendants of prophets, along with their companions, have all lost their lives by way of martyrdom. Then he rode around the area, mounted on his mare with his feet out of the stirrups, while saying, this is the place where the mounts shall rest, and this is where the bodies of the martyrs shall fall. Those who came before them shall not surpass them in rank, and those who came after them shall never reach them in status. This is the status of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his companions in Karbala. In Musnad Ahmad, the Rawi says, فَلَمَّا حَاذَا نَيْنَوَى. This is again Imam Ali alayhi salam. فَلَمَّا حَاذَا نَيْنَوَى وَهُوَ مُنطَلِقٌ إِلَى صَفِّينَ نَادَى عَلِي عليه السلام اصبر أبا عبد الله اصبر أبا عبد الله بشط الفرات. قلت وماذا؟ قال دخلت على النبي صلى الله عليه وآله ذات يوم وعيناه تفيضان. قلت يا نبي الله أغضبك أحد؟ ما شأن عيناك تفيضان؟ قال بل قام من عندي جبريل عليه السلام فحدثني أن الحسين يقتل بشط الفرات. قال فقال هل لك إلى أن أشمك من تربته؟ قال قلت نعم. فمد يده فقبض قبضة من تراب فأعطانيها فلم أملك عيني أن فاضتا. So this is Imam Ali alayhi salam. The narrator says, when we were on the edges of Nainawa, this is kind of the province in which Karbala is located, Ali alayhi salam called out, have forbearance or have patience, O Aba Abdullah. Have patience, Aba Abdullah, on the banks of the Euphrates. My father asked, so the father of this narrator asked Imam Ali alayhi salam, what is the matter? Imam Ali alayhi salam replied, I came to the Prophet one day and found him with his eyes full of tears. So I asked him, O Prophet of God, has anyone caused you distress or anger? Why are there tears in your eyes? He replied, no, rather Jibreel alayhi salam just departed from me. He informed me that Al-Hussein alayhi salam will be killed at the banks of the Euphrates. Then he asked me, Jibreel asked me, do you wish to smell the soil, the spot in which Imam Hussein alayhi salam will fall? Do you want to smell that soil? I said yes. So he reached and grabbed a handful of soil and gave it to me. And I smelled it and I could not stop myself, the Holy Prophet says, from weeping. And there are many other narrations. I don't want to lack time to finish what we have to say. Imam Ali alayhi salam, in many other narrations, he mentions the names of those who killed the Imam, the names of those who do not support the Imam, who betray the Imam. He mentions those who will be with the Imam, the different functions that they will perform, those who will carry the banners, from where they will enter in Kufa, and so on and so forth. We have a lot of these narrations. And the Imam mentions many people by name. I want to end with a couple of narrations to see how Imam Ali alayhi salam did not only talk about Karbala when he passed through Karbala. The Imam would seize every opportunity he had, just like the rest of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, to mention Karbala and to make sure that people connect back to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through their hearts, through the tragedy of Karbala. In this case, this is when Imam Ali alayhi salam was struck. This is when Imam Ali alayhi salam is about to leave this world. In that state, the Rawi says, قال زهير بن الأرقم لما أصيب علي عليه السلام بضربة ابن ملجم دخلت عليه وقد ضم الحسين رحمة الله ورضوانه عليه إلى صدره وهو يقبله ويقول له يا ثمرتي وريحانتي وثمرة نبي الله وصفيه وذخيرة خير العالمين محمد بن عبد الله كأني أراك وقد ذبحت عن قليل ذبحا. قال فقلت ومن يذبحه يا أمير المؤمنين؟ فقال يذبحه لعين من هذه الأمة ثم لا يتوب الله عليه ويقبضه إذ يقبضه وهو ملآن من الخمر سكران. قال زهير فبكيت فقال لي علي فالذي قضي كائن. So in the book in Al-Futuh, the narrator says, I came to see Imam Ali alayhi salam after he had been struck by Ibn Muljim. Imam Ali alayhi salam is about to leave this world. There is poison in his body and his injury has caused him death. And he says, when I came into the room, I found him hugging Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He held him to his chest, kissing him, saying to him, O light of my eyes, O my fragrant flower, O fruit of the heart of the Prophet and his successor, O remaining treasure of the best of all creatures, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, it is as though I see you while you have been slaughtered without mercy soon. The narrator says, so I asked, and who will slaughter him, O commander of the faithful? He answered, he will be slaughtered by the one accursed from this nation, and God will never forgive him. He will take his soul while he is full of wine, inebriated, drunk. The Zuhair says, so I wept, and the Imam said to me that that which God has decreed shall certainly come to pass. Here, the Imam seizes the last opportunity he has in this world to relay messages, to give teachings to his followers, to the world, to bring people back to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to mention the tragedy of Karbala, and once again to connect the people through Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through the heart. I will end with two quick narrations from Imam Ali alayhi salam, and we will end with those. In the first one, the Imam talks about the future, the success of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This is looking way into the future. When the Imam says, كأني بالقصور قد شيدت حول قبر الحسين عليه السلام وكأني بالحوامل تخرج من الكوفة إلى قبر الحسين ولا تذهب الليالي والأيام حتى يسار إليه من الآفاق وذاك عند انقطاع ملك بني مروان. Here Imam Ali alayhi salam says, it is as though I can see the large castles and buildings around the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and the caravans leaving from Kufa towards the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam to visit him. The days and nights shall not end until the travelers will come to him from every horizon, from every point on earth to visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And that will not be until the end of the rule of Bani Marwan. And for those who know the history of Karbala, you know that this has not happened ever in history. This has only happened in the last few years after Saddam's regime, Ba'athist regime, has disappeared, and people started to come to visit Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam from every horizon and every end of earth, which means that this hadith, Imam Ali alayhi salam, is referring to a different people by the name of Bani Marwan, not the ones who existed at that time. In any case, I'll end with our responsibility towards all of this. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he tells Al-Harith al-Hamadani, one of his closest companions, in Kamil al-Ziyarat, بِأَبِي وَأُمِّي الْحُسَيْنِ الْمَقْتُولِ بِظَهْرِ الْكُوفَةِ والله كأني أنظر إلى الوحش مادة أعناقها على قبره من أنواع الوحش يبكونه ويرثونه ليلا حتى الصباح فإذا كان كذلك فإياكم والجفاء. Imam Ali alayhi salam tells this close companion of his, may my father and my mother be sacrificed for Al-Hussein, who will be slain just beyond Kufa. And by God, it is as if I see the various animals and beasts turning their necks towards his grave, weeping for him, spending all night lamenting him. And this is the point of the hadith. When this comes to pass, beware that you do not become of those who are distant, indifferent, forgetful of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying there is a responsibility. The beasts and the animals will be the ones weeping and crying over Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. But after that, the responsibility falls on you. Do not fall in the category of those who have jafa, who are distant and forgetful and indifferent towards Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam, neglectful of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. The Imam is saying, remember Imam Al-Hussein after this happens. Don't let only the beasts and the animals be the ones who lamented Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam. There is a responsibility that inshallah we will carry with us moving forward. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to enter this season of Muharram and Karbala and Ashura with open minds and open hearts, so that we may benefit from the blessings of the guidance of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam and the remembrance of Imam Al-Hussein alayhi salam and his tragedy, and it may transform us from within. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.